To wrap up, let me walk through. I think I've got 6 sort of what I call positive future drivers. I'd like to think of all of them as being positive future drivers, but some of them, frankly, are areas where I think as an industry we need to evolve and grow. This is still a very young and immature industry in the sense of providing power to commercial and industrial customers. Clearly, PV, the technology has been around for a long time, and clearly that's evolving as we go forward. But the notion of providing a power purchase agreement to a school or to a municipality or to a commercial entity is relatively new. And I think there's a lot of opportunity to improve the way we do that to make it easier to spread this technology. So one of the positive drivers, for some of you, you may not be all that enthused by this, but I would argue this is good for all of us. It's decreasing panel costs. As the cost of the technology comes down, the size of the market just grows, geometrically, if not exponentially. We've done an analysis, a fairly conservative analysis, trying to estimate the size of the market, the total size, and not on a per year basis, but the total gigawatts that could be installed utilizing sort of the current pricing that's out there. And our estimate is that it's about 45 gigawatts. And I recently saw an analyst, financial analyst, who did a similar analysis, come up with the same kind of number. Increasing customer demand, I've talked about that. Just like you recognize, electricity prices are headed up, and with greater volatility, customers see the same thing. They also want to be able to move to renewable green energy. They want to buy green electrons. So that's a positive driver. I've already talked about the drive towards stronger, broader, deeper customer relationships. We see that very positively because I think that as customers recognize and channel partners recognize and financial partners recognize the long-term nature of this, there's going to be a move towards working with folks that do a really good job at executing on what they said they were going to do. The next one is, frankly, something that we need to strive to. We're not here yet. The complexity of these agreements is still way too complex, and I think that's a reflection of the fact that there's a lot of lawyers that get involved, and their experience is negotiating very complex agreements for $100, $200, $300, $400 million energy project. If you're doing a $1 million or a $2 million power purchase agreement for a school or a city, you cannot afford to spend as much time with lawyers as you do when you're doing a $400 million project. What I like to say is that, negotiating these agreements with prospective customers needs to be a lot more like renegotiating your mortgage and a lot less like negotiating the national debt. And we're certainly not there yet. The other thing I think everybody in this room probably understands, but well-designed, market-driven, state-level programs are important. We still need the incentives. I firmly believe we need the incentives as a tool to get us to the point where we can achieve grid parity without the need of any form of incentives. I believe that they need to be market-driven. Just before this panel, there was someone else who was talking a little bit about the German experience and the feed-in tariffs. We talked a little bit about some of the pros of the feed-in tariff. There are also disadvantages to the feed-in tariff. And I personally, like to see whatever we do to be as much market-driven as possible. The Spanish experience, while it was fun while it lasted, for many players, it isn't so much fun this year as compared to last year. Finally, what we see happening is that from a financing perspective, clearly 2009 is a very challenging year from a financing perspective. The bankers have essentially taken their money, put it under their proverbial mattresses, and are waiting to see where the global economy goes. They are coming back, there's no doubt about it, we see it happening, but the beginning of late 2008, beginning of 2009 was difficult. But what we do see is that the providers of capital are coming back, and new providers of capital are stepping in with the recognition that this is not a short-term market, but it's a long-term market, a renewal of the ITC for 8 years. We see providers of capital who may have been doing wind or other forms of tax equity-based investing looking into this market and wanting to get involved. So we think that's good. We also think that there's going to be more financial innovation. This falls into the category of the streamlined uniform agreements. I wouldn't say we're there yet. There's work to be done, but we're getting there. So that's all I had. I think we're going to turn it over to Chad and then we'll do questions. Good.